So Gencos are the generating companies. Then second major company which is for distribution, that is Discom. That is distribution companies. Then third, transmission. For transmission, we have Transco, that is transmission companies. Then we have electricity regulators, retailers, or they are also known as power exchange. PX. Then we have market operators, MO. Then we have independent system operators, that is ISO. Then we have regulators, or they are also known as scheduling coordinators, that is SC. Then we have consumers, C. And sometime we may have or we may not have, that can be part of your electricity retailers, that is your retail service provider and auxiliary services. So I am writing them as A and B. That is auxiliary services, AS, and retail service providers, R. So these are the various companies which are performing the all parts of electric power system, which will be mainly consisting of generating companies, distribution companies, then transcos, transmission companies. Then we have various retailers and retail service providers, which will be providing us the supply. Then we have market operators, which will be managing the complete market. Then we have independent service operators. And then we have consumers or regulators. So these are the various companies which are functioning in deregulated environment. So what are the functions of each companies and how they are performing, we will be discussing. So first is your Genco, that is your generating companies. So they are the owner of generators, generating plants. They will be operate generating plants. They will compete against each other to sell energy. So they will be competing with each other. So each generating plant is a different entity. And in deregulated market, all the companies are competing with each other and they want to sell the energy which they are generating. So the advantage of GenCos are, it will be more giving more energy efficient plants. They will be try to use cheaper fuel, and we have higher plant availability. So GenCos are the primary generating sector and they are owner of the generating plants and they will be operating the generating plants that run, and they will be running them and bids the power into the competitive market. They will be bidding their energy generation to the competitive market. So these are generating companies. Then we have DISCO, that is distribution companies. The distribution companies are the companies which will be owner of distribution network. They will be operating, they are operators of local power delivery system, which will be distributing power to local consumers. The distribution companies are regulated business. So it will be determined on the basis of assets the distribution companies have. But if no retail market is available, these companies have monopoly for the sale of electricity in their area. So if a retail market is not available, they have the monopoly for selling the electricity in their area. In some places, the local distribution factor is combined with retail function. That means to buy wholesale electricity either through the spot market or through the direct contract with GenCos and supply the electricity to the end user, that is customer. So we have local distribution functions. Which will be buy wholesale electricity And this electricity can be from open market or it can be from GenCos. So they will be buying the power from, and then they will be distributing that power directly to the consumer. So second operating authority is, then we have power exchange. PX. So power exchange is power exchange are the spot price pool this will be allow different companies to sell and buy energy and other services. So like we have a stock exchange. So actually the stock exchange does not have any entity. They will be only the place for selling and buying of, and they will be providing a common platform to all the companies to sell and to buy the stocks. Similarly, we have power exchanges. They are the marketplace which will allow the participating companies to sell or to buy the energy and other services in a competitive way. The power exchange is new independent, non-government and non-profit entity which accepts schedules for load and generating resources. So the PX are independent, non-government and non-profit entity. It provides a competitive marketplace by running an electronic auction where market participants buy or sell electricity and can do business quickly and easily. Through an electronic auction, PS establishes a minimum selling price for each hour of the following day for the trade between buyers and sellers. So PX is a competitive market which will be running an electronic auction and it will be setting an minimum selling price for each hour which will become a minimum current price for the energy, and where we can buy where buyers and sellers buy or trade. The limitation of PX is they will not deal with small consumers. So they will be only doing the operation between the companies, and small consumers cannot participate in the PX. PX manages settlement and credit arrangement for scheduling and balancing of load and generating resources. So it will manage settlement and credit arrangement for scheduling and balancing. It will submit a balanced demand and supply schedule for successful bidders to ISO and perform settlement function with ISO, that is independent system operators, as well as PX will participate, such as utility distribution companies, markets, and aggregators. So it will be mainly buying electricity from the generators, selling electricity to the companies. It will be generally do not own large physical assets owned by the generation or distribution companies. So the PX will guarantee an equal and non-discriminatory access and competitive opportunity to all the participants. So everyone who is participating in the PX can have equal opportunity for access and place bid and then purchase or sell the electricity. So these are the power exchange. Then we have transcos, that is transmission companies. So they will be own and maintain the transmission assets of the system. Own and maintain transmission assets like various transmission lines, substations, DC lines, etc. And they will operate these assets as instructed by the ISOs. As instructed. So they will operate these assets as instructed by the ISOs. And the basic premise of transmission are open access, that the transmission owners or provider treat all the transmission users on a non-discriminatory and competitive basis regarding assets to the transmission line and services. This requirement could be difficult to ensure if the transmission owners have any financial interest in energy generation or supply. A general trend is to designate an independent service operator to operate the transmission system and facilities provision of transmission services. So if the transmission owners, if the transcom companies start thinking of financial gains, then it will be not possible to operate the system efficiently, so that we have independent service operators, that is ISO, that will operate and facilitate. The transmission services, and maintenance of the transmission system remains the responsibility of the transmission owners. So transcoms are the companies which are maintaining all the transmission line assets. Then we have schedule coordinators. They are SC. So SC will arrange trading between the generators and customers, and SC play an independent intermediary between the ISO, retailers and consumers. So SC will manage or arrange trading between generators and customers, and SC will play an intermediary between ISO, retailers and customers. The SC will submit balance schedule and provide settlement ready data to the ISO, and it will maintain a year-round 24-hour schedule center and provide non-emergency operating instructions to generating companies and retailers. And SC will provide the ISO with its customer demand, supply schedule, transmission use. So the SC is a entity which will be submit balanced schedule and provide settlement ready data. It will maintain a year-round 24 hours schedule center and provide nor emergency operation. It will provide ISO, the customer demand. That means what is the load demand, then supply schedule, and transmission use. And it will run the information through a computer program to check for transmission congestion. It is not an ISO will send approval signal to the scheduling coordinator. Otherwise, the SC will be advised to sell, buy, or trade power to resolve the situation. So SC will play a critical role in the restructured power system. This is different from restructuring proposal, where ISO will be resolving the conflicts. So now, because almost the function of power exchange and scheduling coordinators are same, so we must understand what is the difference between the SC and PX. Almost the PX and SC are look like similar, but the PX has limited roles and traditional function, trade functions. SC could have an ability to negotiate with its own generation and client load and interact with other SCs. SCs will dissolve resulting schedules to its own participants and are not obliged to pass any information to other parties, which conclude that SC could discriminate against some parties. So PX cannot discriminate, but SC can. So when we are selling or buying the power, SC can discriminate between the companies and they can negotiate, but PX cannot negotiate with each other. This fact will give that PX, which publish the MCP based on the non-discriminatory action and notified its participant of these results. So PX will be publishing MCP, that is minimum current price, and on the basis of that, SC will be performing the operation, but this MCP will be a non-discriminatory auction result, and it will be not decided on the basis of any favor to anybody. The PX is guaranteeing non-discriminatory by matching the lowest incremental generation bid with the highest incremental demand bid, while the SC can price discriminate by matching the next highest willingness to pay for demand with a slightly lower generation prices. And then if SC imposed price discrimination, it could lead to the price which would be higher than a uniform MCP determined by the PX. So in the day ahead market, SC participants could trade energy for reducing and lowering the power cost, while PX traders cannot respond to the congestion through bids and trades. This may lead market participants to avoid PX to prevent possible problem in the future. So when we are talking about PX is a non-discriminating entry, but the SC is having a discriminatory power, which will be performing the operation on the basis of favor to anybody. So this is the SC. Now the major part of the deregulated market, that is independent system operator, ISO. So independent system operator, that is ISO, will operate the power system by maintaining the load. It will maintain load or generation balance. It will be responsible for operational reliability, and it will be operates the market of last resort. It must be an independent from the other participant to ensure fairness of the market. It will own only computing and communication assets, and they will be not owning generation, distribution, or transmission any of the device. So it will be on only computing and communication assets, also known as regional transmission organization, RTOs. So a competitive generation market and retail direct access require that there will be a independent operation control of the grid. However, the independent operation of the grid was not guaranteed without an independent entity, and due to this, an independent system operator has come in existence. And ISO is independent to individual market participants. So they are independent to market participants, such as transmission owners, generators, distribution companies, and the end users. The basic purpose of ISO is to ensure a fair and a non-discriminatory access to transmission services and auxiliary services to maintain the real-time operation of the system and facilitate its reliable requirements. So the role of ISO is, the primary objective of ISO is matching electricity with demand as necessary to ensure reliability. So it will maintain the load balance. And ISO should control generation to the extent necessary to maintain reliability and optimize transmission efficiency. So they will also maintain the generation balance of the system. ISO should be structured in a fair and non-discriminatory manner. An ISO and its employee should have no financial interest in its economical performance of any power system market. An ISO should adopt and enforce strict conflict of interest standards. An ISO should provide open access to the transmission system and all services under its control at non-changing price or rates to a single unbundled or grid-wise tariff that applies to all eligible users in a non-discriminatory manner. An ISO should have the primary responsibility in ensuring short-term reliability of the grid operation. Its role is that it is responsible for the well-defined and comply with the applicable standards set by the government. An ISO should have control over the operation of interconnected transmission facilities within the area. An ISO should identify constraints on the system and be able to take operational actions to realize these constraints within the trading rules established by the government. These rules should be performed efficient trading. An ISO should have appropriate incentive for the efficient management and administration and should procure services needed for such management and administration in an open market. An ISO should maintain transmission system information publicly available on a timely basis via an electronic information network consistent with the Commission's requirement. An ISO should develop mechanism to coordinate its activities with neighboring control area. An ISO should establish an alternate dispute resolution process to resolve the disputes in the first instance. So the ISO is the major entity which will be managing the complete power system on a non-discriminatory basis. So this is the major entity which will be performing Then we have a transmission system operators, which will be combine the function of independent system operators and transmission companies. It will combine the functions of ISO and transcos. Then we can have large consumers and then or small consumers. So large consumers are industrial or large commercial consumers may buy directly from the electricity market and may buy the electricity at time varying prices and can sell demand response to reduce or shift load in response to the price or an incentive. So these are generally the industrial load or large commercial consumers. So they will buy directly from market at time varying prices. But the small consumers are residential or small commercial consumers, and they will buy electricity from retailers or distribution companies and buy electricity at a fixed price and too small to sell services directly to the electricity market. So a small consumer cannot sell the electricity to the market, but the industrial or large commercial consumers will manage their load and schedule their load as that they will be having a minimum cost or there will be incentive for their operation. So these are the various companies which are performing various operations in a deregulated market. So when we are shortly discussing the wholesale market, we have GenCos, various GenCos which will be supplying the power. The market is performed or controlled by PS, SC, ISO, TSO, and MO. And then we will be giving the power to DISCOs, and it can be directly selling to large consumers. And DISCOM will be supplying power to the small consumers. So this is a wholesale electricity market structure. So this will not have, the consumer will not have any choice in this structure also. So then we have second, that is market with retail competition, in which we have wholesale market and then we have retail market. So wholesale market will be getting power from GenCos, and then they will be managed by your PX, SC, ISO, TSO, MO, and then they will be selling their power to the retailers. And then these retailers will be giving power to the retail market, where retail market operation is controlled by discos. And then in retail market, it will be supplying power to the consumers. So these are the various wholesale market. First is the wholesale market with electricity, but the second is a wholesale market with retail competition, where the power can be supplied by only retail market, and then in the retail market the consumers have the choice, but in wholesale market the consumer does not have any choice. So this is the basic of various companies which are performing actions in the deregulated market. So these are the various function of various companies. So if you have any doubt, you can ask.